Lauren's shift was supposed to end at 11 p.m. It was now 3 in the morning, and she was still at Metropolitan General Hospital's emergency room, running on caffeine and muscle memory. 2 nurses had called in sick. A multi-car accident had flooded the EO with critical patients, and the attending physician was so overwhelmed he'd basically deputized Lauren to handle triage and initial assessments for anyone who wasn't actively dying. She'd been an A nurse for 6 years. She knew exhaustion, knew how to function when her body was screaming for sleep and her brain felt like it was operating through fog. Knew how to prioritize, how to stay calm, how to keep moving even when everything hurt. But tonight was testing limits she didn't know she had. Lauren was in the supply room, restocking her pockets with gloves and gauze, when she heard shouting from the ambulance bay entrance. Not unusual, people came to emergency rooms in crisis, and crisis often involved raised voices. But something about this commotion felt different, more urgent, more dangerous. She stepped into the hallway to find 2 security guards blocking the entrance, facing off against a man who was clearly trying to get inside. Except he wasn't being aggressive or belligerent like the drunk patients they sometimes had to restrain. He was simply standing there, swaying slightly, one hand pressed to his side where dark stains spread across his expensive-looking shirt. Blood, a lot of it. "Sir, you need to wait for intake," one of the security guards was saying. "He's bleeding," Lauren interrupted, her nurse instincts overriding protocol. She pushed past the guards, moving to the man's side. "How long have you been bleeding? What happened?" The man turned to look at her, and Lauren felt something catch in her chest. He was younger than she'd initially thought, maybe early 30s, with dark hair and striking features that would have been handsome if they weren't currently pale with blood loss and pain. His eyes were a deep brown that seemed almost black in the fluorescent lighting, and they fixed on her with an intensity that was unsettling given his obvious injury. "I need a doctor," he said quietly. His voice was controlled, almost too controlled for someone who was bleeding profusely. No questions, no police report. Just treatment. Red flags went up immediately in Lauren's mind. No questions and no police report usually meant gunshot wounds from gang violence or domestic situations where the victim was afraid of retaliation. Either way, the hospital had legal obligations. But first she had to keep him alive long enough for those obligations to matter. "Can you walk?" Lauren asked, already reaching for his arm to provide support. Yes. But as if to contradict himself, the man's knees buckled slightly. Lauren caught him, surprised by how heavy he was, all muscle despite the tailored clothing that suggested wealth rather than street violence. "Security, get me a wheelchair," Lauren ordered. "Sir, I'm going to help you into the ER. We'll get you stabilized and figure out what's going on. But I need to know what kind of wound this is. Knife? Gunshot? Something else?" "Knife." The word was barely audible. Sighed. "Missed anything vital, I think. But I've lost a lot of blood." "How long ago?" 2 hours. Maybe 3. His eyes were starting to lose focus. "I tried to handle it myself. Couldn't. 3 hours of bleeding from a knife wound. Jesus. He should have come in immediately. But something had kept him away. Fear, pride, or something else Lauren couldn't identify. The wheelchair arrived, and Lauren helped the man into it with practiced efficiency. His weight sagged against her for a moment, and she felt the warmth of his blood soaking through her scrubs where he'd leaned on her. "What's your name?" she asked as she wheeled him toward the treatment area. The man hesitated. "Sebastian. Just a first name." No last name, no elaboration. Another red flag. "Okay, Sebastian. I'm Lauren. I'm a nurse, and I'm going to take care of you. But I need you to stay conscious, all right? Keep talking to me." "Tell me about the pain." "It's manageable." But his voice was getting weaker, his words slightly slurred. Shock setting in, Lauren realized. The adrenaline that had kept him upright was fading fast. She got him into a treatment bay and immediately started working, cutting away his blood-soaked shirt to expose the wound, calling for the attending physician, grabbing 4 supplies to get fluids running. The knife wound was deep, along his left side, still bleeding sluggishly. He was right that it had missed vital organs, but he'd lost enough blood that he was bordering on hypovolemic shock. "Sebastian, stay with me." Lauren said firmly as she established 4 access with practiced speed. You're going to be okay, but I need you to stay awake. Tell me something. Anything. Where were you when this happened? Doesn't matter. His eyes were closed now, his breathing shallow. It matters to me. Come on, Sebastian. Stay awake. Lauren worked quickly, getting the 4 running, applying pressure to the wound, monitoring his vital signs. His blood pressure was too low, his pulse too fast. Dr. Harrison, she called to the attending. I need you here now. Dr. Harrison appeared, took one look at the situation, and started barking orders. More 4 fluids, blood transfusion. Prep for potential surgery if the bleeding didn't stop. Lauren moved through the chaos with automatic efficiency, her exhaustion temporarily forgotten in the focused intensity of trying to keep a patient alive. Sebastian's eyes opened briefly, finding Lauren's face. Thank you, he murmured. For not turning me away. That's my job, Lauren said, though something about the gratitude in his voice made it feel like more than just professional duty. Now stop talking and let us work. The next 2 hours were a blur of medical intervention. The knife wound required surgical repair, which meant taking Sebastian to the OR. Lauren stayed with him through prep, partly because they were short-staffed and partly because something about this patient made her reluctant to hand him off to someone else. You don't have to stay, Dr. Harrison said as they prepped to transfer Sebastian to surgery. Your shift ended hours ago. I know. Lauren looked down at Sebastian's pale face, now sedated for surgery. I just want to make sure he makes it through. Dr. Harrison studied her with tired, knowing eyes. Be careful with this one, Lauren. Patients who show up bleeding and requesting no police involvement are usually trouble. Whatever his story is, it's probably not one you want to be part of. Lauren knew the doctor was right. Knew she should clock out, go home. Forget about the mysterious man who'd appeared at the entrance like something out of a thriller novel. But she couldn't shake the feeling that Sebastian was more than just another patient. Something about him. The controlled way he'd spoken despite obvious pain. The quality of his clothing. The intensity in his eyes when he'd looked at her suggested complications she couldn't begin to imagine. They took him to surgery, and Lauren finally dragged herself to the locker room to change out of her blood-stained scrubs. She should go home. Should sleep for the 8 hours before her next shift started. Should absolutely not hang around waiting for news about a patient who was probably involved in something illegal or dangerous or both. Instead, she found herself in the surgical waiting area, drinking terrible coffee and watching the OR board for updates on Sebastian's status. The surgery took 3 hours. When Dr. Harrison finally emerged, he looked as exhausted as Lauren felt. He's stable, the doctor reported. We repaired the damage, got the bleeding stopped, replaced the blood he lost. He'll need to stay for observation, but barring complications, he should make a full recovery. Relief flooded through Lauren so intensely it surprised her. Can I see him? Dr. Harrison raised an eyebrow. He's in recovery. Won't be conscious for a few hours, and again, Lauren, be careful. We reported the knife wound to the police as required by law. When our mysterious patient wakes up, he's going to have questions to answer. You don't want to be caught in the middle of whatever situation he's running from. I just want to check on him. Make sure he's stable. That's it. But even as Lauren said it, she knew it wasn't entirely true. She wanted to understand who Sebastian was. Why he'd waited so long to seek help. Why gratitude for basic medical care had sounded so profound coming from him. She made her way to the recovery room, found Sebastian's bed in the post-op area. He looked different now. Cleaned up, bandaged properly, with color slowly returning to his face as the blood transfusion and 4 fluids did their work. Still unconscious from anesthesia, but stable. Safe. Lauren stood there for a long moment, studying him. Even unconscious and injured, there was something striking about him. Something that suggested power and control and carefully maintained composure. The kind of person who could get stabbed and walk himself to a hospital, maintain consciousness through blood loss and pain, negotiate treatment terms even while going into shock. Who was Sebastian? And what had happened tonight that had left him bleeding at her hospital's entrance? A hand touched her shoulder, and Lauren jumped. She turned to find one of the night security guards, Marcus, looking uncomfortable. Lauren, there's someone here asking about the patient you brought in. The knife wound. Guy says he's family. But double quotes. Marcus lowered his voice. He's got 2 other guys with him, and they all look like they could be trouble. I told them they couldn't come back here without proper ID and visiting hours, but they're being persistent. Thought you should know. Lauren's stomach tightened. What do they look like? Expensive suits. Professional. But there's something off about them. They're double quotes. Marcus struggled for the word. Too controlled. Like security detail or bodyguards or something. Bodyguards. For a man who'd shown up alone and bleeding, asking for no police involvement. Don't let them back here, Lauren said firmly. Hospital policy. No visitors during recovery, family or not. If they keep pushing, call actual security backup. Marcus nodded and left. Lauren looked back at Sebastian, her mind racing. Bodyguards. Expensive clothing. The way he'd handled pain with such composure. The gratitude for basic care like it was something unusual rather than expected. She'd saved someone important tonight, someone powerful. Someone who had people looking for him and resources that suggested wealth and influence. Someone dangerous. Lauren should walk away right now. Should go home. Forget about the mysterious patient. Let the hospital's social workers and security deal with whatever situation Sebastian was involved in. But as she looked at his unconscious face, remembering the way he'd looked at her with such intensity and gratitude, she knew she wasn't going to walk away. Not yet. Not until she understood who she'd really saved tonight. Sebastian woke slowly, fighting through layers of anesthesia fog to awareness. Pain registered first, sharp but manageable, localized to his left side where someone had apparently decided to stab him. Then confusion about his surroundings. White walls. Beeping monitors. The antiseptic smell of a hospital. He'd made it. Somehow, despite blood loss and his stubborn refusal to seek help until he'd nearly passed out, he'd survived. You're awake. A familiar voice, soft but professional. That's good. How's your pain level? Sebastian turned his head, slowly, because sudden movements seemed inadvisable, to find the nurse from last night sitting in a chair beside his bed. Lauren, she'd said her name was. She looked exhausted, with shadows under her eyes that suggested she hadn't slept. And there were faint stains on her shoes that might have been his blood. You're still here, he said, his voice rough from intubation. I'm still here. Lauren stood, moving to check the monitors with practiced efficiency. You've been in recovery for about 6 hours. The surgery went well. Dr. Harrison repaired the knife wound. You were right that it missed vital organs, but you lost a dangerous amount of blood. You're lucky you came in when you did. Lucky. Sebastian's mouth twitched with something that might have been dark humor. That's not usually a word people associate with me. Well, you're lucky I was working last night. Lauren adjusted his fore, her movements gentle and competent. Someone less stubborn might have let security turn you away until you filled out intake forms and agreed to a police report. Sebastian studied her face, trying to read whether she understood the significance of what she'd done. Trying to assess how much danger he'd inadvertently put her in by coming to this hospital. Thank you, he said quietly, for not turning me away, for saving my life. I know those aren't hollow words, even if I can't fully explain why. Something flickered in Lauren's expression, curiosity, maybe, or wariness. You had people asking about you last night? Men in expensive suits claiming to be family. Security didn't let them back here, but they seemed very invested in finding you. I'm sure they did. Sebastian closed his eyes briefly. His people had tracked him here, which meant others might have as well, the ones who'd put a knife in him in the first place. Which meant Lauren and this hospital were now potentially in danger because of his presence. Are they still here? I don't know. Security was monitoring the situation when I checked a few hours ago. Lauren's voice was carefully neutral. Sebastian, the hospital filed a police report about your injury as we're legally required to do. The police will want to talk to you about what happened. I won't be here that long. Sebastian tried to sit up and immediately regretted it as pain lanced through his side. Whoa, stop. Lauren's hands were on his shoulders, easing him back down with surprising strength. You just had surgery. You're not going anywhere for at least 48 hours. And that's if there are no complications. I can't stay here that long. Sebastian kept his voice low but firm. It's not safe. For me or for anyone else in this hospital. What does that mean? Lauren's eyes narrowed. Are you saying people might come here to hurt you, that staff or patients could be in danger? Sebastian wanted to lie. Wanted to tell her everything was fine, and she had nothing to worry about. But she'd saved his life. She deserved honesty, even if that honesty was dangerous. The people who stabbed me might try to finish the job, he said quietly. They won't care about collateral damage. And the people looking for me, my people, are dangerous in different ways. I didn't want to come here. Didn't want to put anyone at risk. But I was out of options. Lauren sat down slowly, her expression a mix of concern and something else. Maybe anger, maybe fear. So you're telling me I saved someone who's brought danger into my hospital? That my patients and colleagues might be at risk because you walked through those doors? Yes. Sebastian met her eyes directly. I'm sorry. If I'd had any other choice, I would have taken it. But I was dying, and your hospital was the closest option, and I made a decision that might have endangered people who don't deserve it. Who are you? Lauren's voice was steady despite the tension in her shoulders. Really? Not just your first name. Who are you, and what kind of situation have you put us in? Sebastian studied her face, the exhaustion, the determination, the underlying strength that had let her stand up to security guards and save a bleeding stranger without hesitation. She deserved truth. But truth was dangerous, and he'd already endangered her enough. My name is Sebastian Moretti. I run private security and consulting services for high-profile clients. The people who stabbed me are competitors who want to take over my contracts and my territory. They made their point last night, and now they'll either back off or escalate. He paused. And the people looking for me are my employees, my protection detail, who are probably terrified that their boss disappeared bleeding and hasn't checked in. It was truth, but not complete truth. Lauren didn't need to know about the less legal aspects of his empire, about the gray areas and moral compromises that came with operating in the world he inhabited. She just needed to know enough to make informed decisions about her own safety. So you're important. Lauren's voice was flat. Important enough that people want you dead and other people are willing to tear apart a hospital looking for you. Yes. Sebastian wished he could sit up properly. Wished he wasn't having this conversation while lying in a hospital bed in a flimsy gown. But I can fix this. I can contact my people, have them establish a perimeter around the hospital, make sure no one gets in who shouldn't. And once I'm stable enough to move, I'll disappear and take the danger with me. You're not stable enough to move. Lauren stood, pacing to the window. Dr. Harrison said you need at least 2 days of observation, probably more. You lost a massive amount of blood, Sebastian. Your body needs time to recover. I don't have time. Sebastian tried again to sit up, moving more carefully this time. The pain was intense but manageable. Every hour I stay here is another hour of risk for everyone in this building. Then we deal with the risk. Lauren turned to face him, and there was steel in her voice. I'm not letting you walk out of here and kill yourself through stubbornness. You're my patient, which means I have a professional obligation to keep you alive whether you like it or not. Lauren? No. She moved back to his bedside, and her eyes were fierce. You don't get to make unilateral decisions about your own health just because you're worried about danger. If the situation is as serious as you say, then we get hospital security involved. We contact the police, we take proper precautions. But you're staying here until you're medically cleared to leave. Sebastian found himself staring at this woman who'd saved his life and was now refusing to let him put himself at risk again. She was stubborn and brave and completely unaware of how dangerous the world he operated in really was. You don't understand what you're asking, he said quietly. The people after me don't follow normal rules. They won't be deterred by hospital security or police presence. If they want me dead badly enough, they'll find a way. Then I guess we better make sure they don't find you. Lauren's voice was firm. You said your people are looking for you? The ones with expensive suits and protective instincts? Call them. Get them involved. Let them do their job so you can focus on healing. Sebastian studied her face, seeing the determination that wouldn't be swayed by logic or threats or warnings about danger. She decided to protect him, the same way she decided to save him last night, despite the red flags and questionable circumstances. "Why?" he asked. "Why do you care what happens to me? You don't know me. I'm probably exactly the kind of trouble your doctor warned you to avoid. So why risk yourself for a stranger who brought danger to your workplace?" Lauren was quiet for a moment, her expression thoughtful. "Because you walked into my hospital bleeding and desperate, and I saved your life, and that means something. Because you could have lied to me about the danger, could have let me stay ignorant and feel safer, but you told me the truth instead. And because ... double quotes, she paused. Because I've been an EA nurse for 6 years and I've seen thousands of patients, and something about you is different. You're not just another victim or criminal or complicated situation. You're a person who's trying to survive in a dangerous world, and I respect that enough to give you the chance to actually heal before you throw yourself back into it." The honesty in her words hit Sebastian harder than he expected. He was used to people being afraid of him or wanting things from him or trying to manipulate him. He wasn't used to someone simply seeing him as a person worth protecting because protection was what they offered everyone regardless of circumstance. "All right," he said quietly. "I'll call my people. But Lauren, when this is over, when I'm healed and gone from here, I want you to forget you ever met me. Forget I existed. Because knowing me, caring about what happens to me, that's dangerous in ways you can't imagine. And I've already put you at enough risk without adding the complication of being remembered. I'll make you a deal." Lauren pulled out her phone, handing it to him. "You call your people. Get protection established. Focus on healing. And when you're ready to leave, we'll talk about whether forgetting each other is actually what either of us wants." Sound fair? It wasn't fair at all. Fair would be Sebastian disappearing without a trace, leaving Lauren safe in her ignorance. But as he took the phone and dialed a number he knew by heart, Sebastian found himself hoping that maybe, just maybe, she wouldn't forget him. And that terrified him more than the knife wound ever had. Within 2 hours of Sebastian's phone call, Metropolitan General Hospital's security situation changed dramatically. Lauren noticed it during her rounds, new faces positioned at key entry points, professional and alert in a way that the regular security guards weren't. They wore suits rather than uniforms, carried themselves with military precision, and communicated through subtle gestures and what looked like hidden earpieces. Sebastian's people had arrived. One of them, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and an air of competent authority, introduced herself to Lauren as Diana. "I'm Mr. Moretti's security coordinator," she said with professional courtesy. "Thank you for taking care of him last night. We've been extremely concerned." "He's stable," Lauren said, keeping her voice neutral despite her curiosity about what security coordinator actually meant. "But he needs rest and monitoring. He lost a lot of blood." "Understood." Diana pulled out a tablet, pulling up what looked like a detailed hospital floor plan. "We've established a perimeter. No one gets to Mr. Moretti's room without clearance. We've also identified potential vulnerabilities in the building and stationed personnel accordingly. Your regular security team has been briefed and is cooperating fully." Lauren stared at the efficiency of this operation. "You did all of this in 2 hours?" "We're very good at what we do." Diana's voice was matter-of-fact. "And Mr. Moretti is very important to us. We won't let anything happen to him, or to the hospital staff who've taken care of him." There was something reassuring about Diana's presence. The sense that someone competent was handling the dangerous situation Sebastian had warned about. But it was also unsettling. This reminder that she'd saved someone who required this level of security and had these kinds of resources at his disposal. "Can I ask you something?" Lauren said quietly. "Who is he really?" "Sebastian. Beyond private security consulting. He's obviously more than just a businessman if he needs this kind of protection." Diana studied Lauren's face carefully. "He's someone who operates in complicated spaces, helps people navigate dangerous situations, and has made enemies by being very good at what he does." "That's all I can tell you." It wasn't really an answer, but Lauren understood that it was all the answer she'd get. Over the next day, Lauren found herself checking on Sebastian more frequently than her other patients. partly because she was monitoring his recovery, partly because she was responsible for having gotten him to agree to stay, and partly because she couldn't shake the curiosity about who he really was. Sebastian, for his part, was a terrible patient. He chafed at bed rest, tried to work from his hospital bed using a laptop Diana brought him, and generally behaved like someone who wasn't used to being vulnerable or dependent on others for care. "You need to rest," Lauren told him for the third time that afternoon, finding him on a phone call despite her explicit instructions to minimize stress. "I'm running a business," Sebastian replied after ending the call. "I can't just disappear for days without consequences. You almost disappeared permanently." Lauren checked his vitals with perhaps more force than necessary. "Your body needs to heal, Sebastian. That means rest, not working yourself back into a crisis." "Yes, Nurse Lauren." But there was amusement in his voice rather than irritation. They fell into a strange rhythm over those 2 days. Lauren would come by for regular checks, find Sebastian trying to work or push his limits, scold him into compliance, and end up staying longer than necessary just talking. About nothing in particular. Books they'd read, places they'd traveled, small observations about life that felt oddly intimate given the clinical setting. Lauren learned things during those conversations. That Sebastian had built his security business from almost nothing after his father died, transforming it from something questionable into something more legitimate. That he was lonely in a way that had nothing to do with being alone and everything to do with the walls required by his profession. That beneath the controlled exterior was someone thoughtful and surprisingly vulnerable when he let his guard down. "Why did you become a nurse?" Sebastian asked on the second evening, when Lauren stopped by during a break in her shift. "I wanted to help people." Lauren settled into the chair beside his bed, grateful for a chance to sit after hours on her feet. "I know that sounds simplistic, but it's true. I grew up watching people struggle with health crises, medical bills, feeling helpless in the face of sickness and injury. Becoming a nurse meant I could actually do something about that." "You're good at it." Sebastian's voice was quiet. "The helping. The caring about what happens to people even when they're difficult or complicated." "Thank you." Lauren felt warmth spread through her chest at the compliment. "And thank you for staying. For letting me help you properly instead of stubbornly checking yourself out. You didn't give me much choice." But Sebastian was smiling. "You're terrifyingly insistent when you decide someone needs to be protected. Only when they're worth protecting." The words came out more personal than Lauren intended. Sebastian's expression shifted, became more intense, more focused on her face. "Lauren, when I leave here, my world goes back to being dangerous and complicated. The kind of life where people like you, good people who help others, don't belong. I need you to understand that." "I understand." Lauren held his gaze. "But I also understand that you're more than just the dangerous world you operate in. You're a person who's trying to do better, to be better, even when circumstances make it difficult. And that person is worth knowing, regardless of complications." "You see too much." Sebastian's voice was rough. "You make me want things I shouldn't want. Believe things I stopped believing a long time ago." "What kinds of things?" "That maybe I could have something normal. Someone who sees me as more than just a resource or a threat. A life that's about more than just survival and business and maintaining control." He paused. "But wanting those things doesn't make them possible. And getting close to me puts you at risk I can't justify." Lauren wanted to argue, wanted to tell him that she was willing to accept risks if it meant connection with someone who made her feel more alive than she had in years. But before she could respond, Diana appeared in the doorway with an expression that made Lauren's stomach drop. "We have a situation," Diana said quietly. "Police are here asking questions about the knife wound. Hospital administration is insisting on cooperation. And someone tried to access the hospital's patient database remotely. We blocked it, but whoever is looking for Sebastian is getting more aggressive." Sebastian's entire demeanor changed in an instant, from thoughtful and vulnerable to controlled and strategic. "Activate Protocol 3. Get the car ready." "I'm leaving tonight." "You're not medically cleared," Lauren started. "I don't have a choice anymore." Sebastian was already disconnecting monitors, starting to sit up despite the obvious pain. "If people are actively trying to find me here, then staying puts everyone at risk. I'm stable enough to heal somewhere else." "Diana," Get me out of this hospital within the hour. Sebastian, you could tear your stitches. Lauren tried again. Then you'll come with us. Sebastian's eyes found hers, intense and determined. Come with me. Make sure I don't do anything medically stupid. Stay until you're satisfied I'm actually stable. Then go home and forget this ever happened. Lauren stared at him, processing what he was asking. Leave the hospital with the patient. Go to some unknown location with private security detail. Get more deeply involved in whatever dangerous situation Sebastian was navigating. Every rational part of her brain screamed that this was a terrible idea. Okay, she heard herself say. I'll come. But only to make sure you're actually stable. And then I'm coming back here and filing the weirdest incident report of my career. Sebastian's mouth curved in a real smile, warm and grateful. Deal. Diana was already moving, coordinating the extraction with efficient precision. Lauren found herself swept up in the operation, changing into street clothes, being briefed on how to move through the hospital without attracting attention, following Diana and 2 other security personnel through service corridors she'd never known existed. They got Sebastian into a wheelchair, covered him with a blanket to hide his hospital gown, and moved him through the building like they were simply transporting a patient between departments. The whole operation took less than 30 minutes from Diana's warning to Sebastian being loaded into a luxury SUV in the hospital's service entrance. Lauren climbed in beside him, her heart pounding with a mix of adrenaline and disbelief at what she was doing. Sebastian looked pale and pained but determined, his hand pressed to his side where the surgical wound was probably protesting the movement. Where are we going? Lauren asked as the SUV pulled away from the hospital. Somewhere safe, Sebastian said quietly. Where I can heal without endangering anyone else. And where you can make sure I don't die from stubbornness. The SUV drove through the city, streets with practiced efficiency, eventually pulling into an underground garage beneath a building that looked expensive and exclusive. They took a private elevator to a penthouse apartment that made Lauren's small rental look like a closet. Diana got. Sebastian settled in a bedroom with medical equipment that suggested this wasn't the first time he'd needed to recover from injuries at home. Lauren found herself in the strange position of providing nursing care in a luxury penthouse, checking Sebastian's vitals and wound site, while security personnel maintained a perimeter and Diana coordinated whatever resources were needed. This is insane, Lauren said as she finished checking Sebastian's bandages. I'm supposed to be at the hospital working my shift. Instead, I'm here playing private nurse to someone who has an entire security team and what looks like a home medical setup that's better equipped than some clinics. I know. Sebastian caught her hand, his grip gentle but deliberate. Thank you. For coming with me. For caring enough to make sure I'm actually safe. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. Lauren squeezed his hand back. You're still my patient. Which means I'm responsible for your recovery whether we're in a hospital or a penthouse. Just my patient? Sebastian's voice was quiet, his dark eyes searching her face. Lauren knew what he was asking. Knew that the connection between them had become something more than professional obligation. Knew that leaving here meant leaving behind someone who'd become important in ways she was only beginning to understand. I don't know, she admitted. But I think we both need to survive the next few days before we figure out what this is. Fair enough, Sebastian settled back against the pillows, exhaustion finally showing in his face. Stay tonight. Make sure I don't do anything stupid. And then tomorrow, we'll figure out next steps. Lauren agreed, settling into a chair beside his bed, while Sebastian drifted into needed sleep. Diana brought her coffee and a tablet with Sebastian's medical records, professional and courteous despite the bizarre situation. And Lauren sat there in a stranger's penthouse, watching over a man she barely knew but somehow cared about anyway, and wondered what exactly she'd gotten herself into. Lauren stayed 3 days. What was supposed to be one night of monitoring Sebastian's condition turned into something more as she realized just how serious his situation was. The knife wound was healing, but slowly. He developed a low-grade fever that suggested possible infection. And his stubborn insistence on working from bed was actively hindering his recovery. You need an actual nurse, Lauren told Diana on the second morning. Someone who can provide round-the-clock care and make sure he's actually following medical protocols. We tried, Diana said with evident frustration. He refused. Said he doesn't trust medical professionals he doesn't know in his personal space. But apparently he trusts you. It was absurd and flattering in equal measure. Lauren had her own job, her own life, responsibilities at the hospital she couldn't just abandon. But she also couldn't shake the feeling that Sebastian needed her specifically. Not just professional care, but the connection they'd started building. So she called in sick, arranged coverage for her shifts, settled into the guest room of Sebastian's penthouse, and became his temporary private nurse. It was during those 3 days that Lauren really got to know him. Not just the controlled businessman who ran a security empire, but the person underneath. Thoughtful, surprisingly funny when he let his guard down, deeply loyal to the people who worked for him. She learned that he read philosophy in his spare time, that he played piano but hadn't touched one in years, that he built his business partly to prove his father wrong about what kind of man he could become. She learned about the gray areas he operated in, protecting clients who were sometimes questionable, navigating situations that required moral compromises, building an empire that was legitimate but touched illegal worlds at the edges. I'm not a good man, Sebastian admitted one evening when Lauren was checking his wound and they'd fallen into one of their increasingly personal conversations. I've done things I'm not proud of, made choices that prioritize survival and success over ethics. I've hurt people who probably didn't deserve it and protected people who definitely didn't. But you're trying to be better. Lauren applied fresh bandages with gentle precision. You've spent years moving your business toward more legitimate work, drawing ethical lines your father never bothered with. That counts for something, does it? Sebastian's voice was tired. Or am I just fooling myself that incremental improvement makes up for fundamental compromises? I think it makes you human. Lauren settled back in her chair. Perfect people don't exist, Sebastian. We're all compromised in different ways, all carrying choices we wish we could undo. What matters is whether we're moving towards something better or just accepting that we're already as good as we're going to get. And you think I'm moving towards something better? I know you are. Lauren met his eyes steadily. Because you could have stayed in that life your father built. Could have kept operating the way he did. But you didn't. You chose something harder, trying to be legitimate in a world that doesn't always reward legitimacy. That takes courage. Sebastian studied her face for a long moment. You make me want to believe that. Want to think that maybe I'm not too far gone to become someone worth knowing. You're already someone worth knowing. Lauren said it with quiet certainty. Complicated, yes. Operating in gray areas I don't fully understand, absolutely. But worth knowing. Worth caring about. Something shifted in Sebastian's expression, became more vulnerable, more open. Lauren, when this is over, when I'm healed and you go back to your life at the hospital, I need you to understand something. Caring about me is dangerous. The people who stabbed me aren't going to stop being a threat just because I survived. And there will always be new threats, new situations, new complications. That's the reality of my world. So what are you saying? Lauren kept her voice steady, despite the sudden tightness in her chest. That we should just forget about whatever this is developing between us? Pretend these 3 days didn't happen. I'm saying you deserve better than someone whose life involves security details and threats and situations that could put you at risk. Sebastian's voice was rough with emotion. You deserve someone normal. Someone safe. Someone who can give you a relationship that doesn't come with bodyguards and constant vigilance and the possibility that caring about them might get you hurt. Don't I get a say in what I deserve? Lauren leaned forward, her voice intense. Don't I get to decide what risks I'm willing to take and what complications I can handle? You're making decisions for me, Sebastian, based on what you think I should want rather than what I actually want. What do you want? The question was almost desperate. Lauren took a breath, knowing that what she said next would change everything. I want to know you, really know you. I want to understand the man behind the security empire and the gray areas in the carefully maintained control. I want to see if this connection we've built over 3 days is real or just proximity and circumstance. She paused. And yes, I understand that comes with complications and risks, but I'm a nurse, Sebastian. I deal with complications and risks every single day. I can handle your world if you let me try. Sebastian's hand reached for hers, his grip tight and deliberate. I don't know how to do this. How to let someone in without putting them in danger. How to have something normal when nothing about my life is normal. Then we'll figure it out together. Lauren squeezed his hand back. We'll set boundaries where we need them. We'll be careful about your security concerns. And we'll take this slowly, one day at a time, and see what develops. She smiled slightly. Besides, you still need medical monitoring for at least another week. So you're stuck with me whether you like it or not. Sebastian laughed. A real laugh that transformed his face. Stuck with you. That's the best threat anyone's made in years. They talked long into that night, establishing what a relationship between them might look like. Lauren would go back to the hospital, return to her regular life, but they'd stay in contact. Sebastian would focus on healing and on handling the business complications that had led to him being stabbed. They'd take it slow, careful, seeing each other when it was safe and maintaining distance when it wasn't. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't the kind of uncomplicated relationship Lauren had always imagined having. But it was real and honest and worth trying. On her last day at the penthouse, Lauren did a final check of Sebastian's wound and vital signs. Everything looked good. The infection had cleared, he was healing properly, and his stubbornness had been adequately managed to prevent him from doing anything medically stupid. You're clear to resume normal activities, she told him with professional formality that was belied by the warmth in her voice. With restrictions. No heavy lifting, no strenuous exercise, follow up in 2 weeks to check the healing. And my private nurse? Sebastian asked. Does she come back for follow-up appointments? She might. Lauren allowed herself to smile. If her patient behaves himself and doesn't do anything to tear his stitches or end up bleeding at another hospital entrance. I'll do my best. Sebastian stood, carefully mindful of his healing wound, and moved closer to her. Lauren, thank you. For saving my life. For staying when you didn't have to. For seeing something in me worth caring about despite all the very valid reasons to run in the opposite direction. You're welcome. Lauren reached up, touching his face gently. And Sebastian? Don't forget, you're more than just the dangerous world you operate in. You're a person worth knowing. Don't let anyone, including yourself, convince you otherwise. He kissed her then, carefully, mindful of his injuries but with an intensity that made Lauren's breath catch. It was a promise and a beginning and an acknowledgement of everything they'd shared over these strange, intense days. When they finally broke apart, both knowing it was time for Lauren to leave, Sebastian pressed something into her hand. A card, simple, black, with just a phone number embossed in silver. My direct line, he said quietly. For when you want to check on your patient, or when you just want to talk, or when you decide you're ready to see what this thing between us might become. Lauren tucked the card into her pocket, committing the number to memory. I'll call. Probably more often than is strictly professional. Good. Sebastian smiled. I'll be waiting. Diana drove Lauren back to her apartment, professional and courteous, answering Lauren's questions about security protocols and what to do if anyone connected to Sebastian's business ever approached her. It was surreal, getting safety briefings about a life she'd stumbled into by simply doing her job and saving a bleeding stranger. When Lauren finally made it back to her own small apartment, she stood in the familiar space feeling like she'd been gone for months rather than days. Everything looked the same. Her cluttered kitchen, her worn furniture, her collection of medical texts and mystery novels. But she felt different. Changed by 3 days of caring for someone who'd needed her in ways that went beyond professional medical care. Changed by conversations that had revealed depths to Sebastian Moretti she could never have imagined from their first meeting. In the IA, changed by allowing herself to care about someone whose life was complicated and dangerous and completely outside her normal experience. Lauren pulled out the black card, running her thumb over the embossed number. She should probably wait a few days before calling. Should let things settle, give herself time to process everything that had happened. Instead, she picked up her phone and dialed. Sebastian answered on the second ring. Lauren. Hi, she said, suddenly feeling awkward. I just wanted to make sure you were okay. That moving around after I left wasn't too much. I'm fine. There was warmth in his voice. Better than fine, actually. Knowing you cared enough to call within an hour of leaving makes me feel better than any medication could. Lauren smiled, settling onto her couch with the phone pressed to her ear. That's good. Because your recovery depends on positive attitude and proper care. So I'll be calling regularly to make sure you're maintaining both. I'm counting on it. Sebastian paused. Lauren, thank you. For taking a chance on someone who probably doesn't deserve it. You deserve it, Lauren said firmly. And I'm going to keep reminding you of that until you believe it. They talked for another hour, about nothing in particular and everything at once, neither wanting to be the first to end the call. And when they finally said goodnight, Lauren lay in bed thinking about a man she'd met as a bleeding stranger and who'd become someone important in the span of less than a week. It was crazy, reckless, potentially the worst decision she'd ever made. But it also felt like maybe, just maybe, it was exactly the right decision at exactly the right time. 3 weeks after Lauren returned to work at the hospital, Sebastian showed up at the end of her shift. She found him waiting in the parking lot, leaning against a car that probably cost more than her annual salary, looking healthy and composed and nothing like the bleeding, desperate man who'd stumbled into her almost a month ago. Hi, he said simply. Hi yourself. Lauren tried to suppress her smile and failed. You're supposed to be resting. Not standing in hospital parking lots at midnight looking suspicious. I'm healed. Sebastian pushed off from the car, and Lauren could see he was moving normally. No hesitation or protection of his wounded side. Clean bill of health from my doctor. No restrictions. And I wanted to see you. You could have called. You do call. Every day. But Lauren was moving closer despite her words, drawn to him in a way she'd stopped trying to resist. Calling isn't the same as seeing you. Sebastian's voice was quiet. I wanted to ask you something in person. Something important. Lauren's heart picked up speed. Okay, what is it? I want to take you to dinner. A real date. Not conversations in a hospital room or recovery check-ins or phone calls where we're both pretending this is still just about my medical care. He met her eyes steadily. I want to see if what we started building over those days at the penthouse is real. If you're still interested in trying this with all its complications, I'm interested. Lauren said it without hesitation. But Sebastian, I need you to be honest with me about what trying this actually means. Your world, your work, the dangers that come with knowing you, I need to understand all of it, not just the parts you think I can handle. Fair enough. Sebastian stepped closer. Then let me take you to dinner. Somewhere nice. Somewhere we can talk honestly about everything without medical equipment or security concerns or circumstances forcing us to rush through important conversations. When? Now, tonight, unless you have somewhere else to be. Lauren thought about her tiny apartment, her exhaustion after a 12-hour shift, all the very good reasons she should go home and sleep and not get more deeply involved with a man whose life was infinitely more complicated than her own. Let me change, she said instead. I'm not going to a nice restaurant in scrubs covered in various bodily fluids. Sebastian's smile was warm and genuine. I'll wait. Lauren changed quickly in the locker room, swapping her work clothes for jeans and a decent top she kept in her locker for emergencies. She looked at herself in the mirror and wondered what exactly she was doing. She was about to go on a date with someone who'd come into her life bleeding and desperate, who ran a security empire with questionable connections, who operated in gray areas she didn't fully understand. But she was also going to dinner with someone who'd been honest about his flaws, who was trying to be better than his circumstances, who looked at her like she mattered in ways that went beyond professional care or convenient companionship. The restaurant Sebastian took her to was elegant without being ostentatious. The kind of place that whispered money and discretion rather than shouting it. They were seated in a private corner booth where they could talk without being overheard, and Sebastian ordered wine with practiced ease. So, Lauren said once they'd ordered food. Complete honesty about your world. I'm ready. Sebastian took a breath, and Lauren could see him making the decision to trust her with the truth. I run a private security and consulting business that operates in the space between legal and illegal. Most of what I do is legitimate, protecting high-profile clients, providing security for events, consulting on risk management. But some of my clients are involved in things that aren't strictly legal, and protecting them means sometimes turning a blind eye to activities I'd rather not know about. What kind of activities? Money laundering, fraud, occasionally violence. Though I draw the line at protecting anyone involved in truly terrible things. Sebastian's voice was steady, but there was tension in his shoulders. I've spent the last 5 years trying to move away from the questionable clients to build a business that's completely legitimate. But it's slow going. And in the meantime, I'm still operating in spaces that make me complicit in things I'm not proud of. Lauren processed this, appreciating his honesty even as she struggled with the implications. And the people who stabbed you? Competitors who want my contracts and my client list. They made their point. That I'm vulnerable. That they can reach me. Now it's a question of whether they'll back off or escalate. Sebastian met her eyes. And that's the reality of being with me. There will always be threats. Always security concerns. Always the possibility that someone will try to use you as leverage against me if they know you matter to me. Is that why you're telling me all this? To scare me off? Lauren kept her voice calm, despite the tightness in her chest. I'm telling you because you deserve to make an informed decision. Sebastian's hand reached across the table, taking hers. I care about you, Lauren. More than is probably wise given how recently we met. But I won't lie to you or minimize the risks of being with me just to keep you around. You need to know what you'd be signing up for. Lauren looked down at their joined hands, feeling the warmth of his touch and the weight of the decision ahead of her. She could walk away right now. Could thank him for his honesty and return to her safe, uncomplicated life at the hospital. Could avoid all the risks and complications that came with caring about Sebastian Moretti. But she'd never been particularly good at choosing safe over meaningful. Here's what I know, Lauren said quietly. I know you're complicated and operating in gray areas I don't fully understand. I know that being with you comes with risks most people wouldn't choose. I know you have enemies and security concerns and a past you're not entirely proud of. She squeezed his hand. But I also know you're trying to be better. That you've been honest with me even when lying would have been easier. That you look at me like I matter in ways no one else has in a long time. And that's worth trying for. Even with complications. Lauren, I'm not done. She cut him off gently. But if we're going to try this, we need rules. Boundaries. You said there will always be security concerns. Fine, but that means I need to know what those concerns are. Not just vague warnings about danger, but actual information about threats so I can make informed decisions. And you need to trust me to handle that information like an adult rather than trying to protect me through ignorance. That's fair. Sebastian's voice was rough with emotion. What else? You keep working toward legitimizing your business. I know it's slow, but it needs to stay a priority. I can accept where you are right now, but I need to know you're actively moving towards something better. Lauren paused. And we go slow. We don't rush into anything just because the circumstances of how we met were intense. We date like normal people. Figure out if this connection is real, and see where it goes naturally. I can do all of that. Sebastian's thumb brushed across her knuckles. Thank you. For giving this a chance. For seeing past the complications to something worth trying. Thank you for being honest, Lauren replied. For trusting me with the truth even when it would have been easier to hide it. Their food arrived and they spent the next 2 hours talking. Not about dangerous business or security concerns, but about normal things. Lauren's work at the hospital. Sebastian's attempts to learn cooking during his recovery. Books they'd both read. Places they wanted to travel. It was easy and comfortable and felt like the beginning of something real. When Sebastian dropped her at her apartment later that night, he walked her to her door with old-fashioned courtesy that made her smile. When can I see you again? He asked. Are you asking for a second date or a follow-up medical appointment? Both, Sebastian smiled. I like having a nurse who cares whether I'm taking care of myself. Even if the caring comes with a side of romantic interest. Saturday, Lauren decided. If you're free, something casual this time. Maybe just coffee and a walk. See if we can do normal without the intensity of hospitals and recovery and complicated conversations. Saturday works. Sebastian moved closer, his hand coming up to cup her face. Can I kiss you goodnight? Without medical concerns or security protocols or anything complicated. Yes, Lauren leaned into him. Definitely yes. The kiss was different from the one in his penthouse. Slower, deeper, without the urgency of his recovery, or the weight of everything left unsaid. It was a promise of something developing, something worth nurturing, something that might just work despite all the valid reasons it shouldn't. When they finally broke apart, both breathing a little harder, Sebastian rested his forehead against hers. "I'm falling for you," he admitted quietly. In case that wasn't obvious. It was pretty obvious, Lauren smiled. And for the record, I'm falling too. Which is either the best or worst decision I've ever made. Let's aim for best. Sebastian kissed her once more, quick and sweet. Get some sleep. I'll call you tomorrow. Lauren let herself into her apartment and stood with her back against the door, trying to process everything that had just happened. She'd agreed to date someone whose life involved security details and gray area business dealings and threats she couldn't fully predict. It was crazy, reckless, everything her practical, sensible nurse brain told her to avoid. But it was also real and honest and more alive than she'd felt in years. Her phone buzzed with a text from Sebastian. Made it home. Thank you for tonight. For taking a chance on someone complicated. I won't let you regret it. Lauren smiled and texted back. You better not. I don't save people's lives just to have them make me regret knowing them. His response was immediate. Deal. Now get some sleep. Doctor's orders. Or in this case, patient's orders from someone who knows how stubborn nurses can be about self-care. Lauren laughed and headed to bed, her mind already planning Saturday's date and wondering where exactly this thing with Sebastian Moretti was heading. 6 months ago, she'd been working her shifts at the hospital, living a predictable if exhausting life, never imagining that one bleeding stranger at the A entrance could change everything. But that's how the best things happen sometimes. Not through careful planning or safe choices, but through moments of crisis that force connection. Through seeing someone at their most vulnerable and choosing to help anyway. Through taking risks that defied logic but followed something deeper than reason. Lauren fell asleep thinking about dark eyes and honest conversations, and a man who'd walked into her life bleeding and desperate and become something infinitely more important than just another patient. And somewhere across the city, Sebastian Moretti fell asleep thinking about a stubborn nurse who'd saved his life, and then refused to let him push her away despite every valid reason she should have run. Two people from completely different worlds, finding something unexpected and real in the space between emergency rooms and security details, between professional care and personal connection. Sometimes the person you saved ended up saving you right back.